I say a lot of fun because, like I said, I learned about what? Raspberry Pi. I learned about ATM jackpots. This is great. I mean, there's some really interesting, shall we say, crimes that I really wasn't totally aware of. So this is great. But now here to end the first day, this is one of my favorites because this raises a very, very big question at the end of the day. Because we're talking about ransomware, okay? We're talking about somebody coming in, grabbing all your information, encrypting it, and telling you, pay me, or basically you're out of business. And now you have to answer that question. We were just talking about that. What do we do? So at our AML conference in March, we had a panel with regulators. Actually, we had somebody from the Federal Reserve and somebody from the Department of Justice. The moderator was a little shy, and you know I'm not shy, so I came on the stage and I walked right up, and they were sitting right here, and I said, okay, gentlemen, here's the question. What do they do? Pay or don't pay? And so, of course, they looked at me and said, well, we're not here. You know how they do the disclaimer. We don't give advice on what you should do. But, of course, our answer is always don't pay. But from your side, that's very easy for them to say. But if your business is completely shut down, making that decision is that much more challenging. So we're going to hear about ransomware. That question will obviously come up. So as I said, this is one of my favorites. I think a great way to end the day. And then after that, we will have the cocktail reception where you can all drink your troubles away a little bit and maybe relax after hearing all of this scary information. So I will turn it over to our moderator, Alejandro Aguirre. Alejandro.
David, thank you so much. Thank you so much all for being here and being with us at the end of this day. I'm Alejandro Aguirre. For many years I was a journalist, and now I have the privilege of working with a company called PRODAFT based in Europe, soon to be coming to the US, and getting to know this man here on your right, my left, Korea Kuzan, whose bio you can find in the program and on the internet, but whose life changed radically in 2012 when he and two friends came together, joined forces to create this company called PRODAFT, which is dedicated to cyber intelligence. And as most of you know, cyber intelligence, cybersecurity are related, but they're not exactly the same thing. And one of the things I wanted to ask you, Korea, can you talk to us, what's the difference between cyber intelligence and cyber security?
Of course, gladly. First of all, thanks everyone for having me here. So basically, I know they are very similar concepts, but to put it in very simple terms, what you are trying to achieve with cybersecurity is to have a mechanism in place that can protect you for already initiated attacks. Basically, when the attacks already start, you need to have something such as a firewall, such as an EDR solution, such as a forensic solution for actual present attacks. However, in the area of cyber intelligence, our main motivation is to predict the attacks that you will be facing in the future. So the success of cyber intelligence is defined by how accurate you are in terms of your predictions. So basically, thanks to cyber intelligence, I can, with a very high probability, tell you what will be your biggest risk, which guys out of which country, with what motivation, by using what tools, will most probably target your organization. So by means of cyber intelligence, you can make your cyber security tools work better, because today's sophisticated attacks are very difficult to battle unless you almost exclusively know what you're dealing with.
Thank you. This morning, we had a presentation where we had some people here who talked about things that you are very familiar with, because you, even though you're part of a private company, you were involved with them, and that was Conti, the Lockbit takedown, and Endgame. I would like to ask you if you could talk to us a little bit about some of the participation that you did, that you had, what your experience was in dealing with these things. I think Lockbit perhaps and Conti are the ones that are best known.
Yeah, happy to. So first of all, I know most of you are hearing about our company for the first time. We are usually more known or recognized in the law enforcement circles. What we're doing as a company, as an advisor to Europol and who cooperates with NCA and other US law enforcement agencies, what we do is we assist their investigation. Because we always put our emphasis on what we call signal intelligence. So when we see something important, worthy of attention, an interesting activity in the cyber underground, we start watching it. A mal-spam campaign, a malware distribution campaign, or something like that. We don't know even what we are following at the first glance. We say, oh, this is important. And all of these operations were us noticing that, oh, this is a very important group. And then we reported to law enforcement saying that we found a particularly, for example, in the case of Lockbit, we said, in terms of ransomware-as-a-service, as a franchise, we found a source which is worthy of your attention. That was the first Lockbit. And then we detected how their internal mechanisms work for the first time globally, even before all responsible parties. That shed light into starting of OpChronos, the Lockbit investigation. And then these things usually take years to really investigate. And by connecting bits and pieces that you detect with after years and years and on end that shape up to be these investigations. For example, in the case of Lockbit, yes, everybody is talking about them, but we were watching them for 3 years. They grew in front of us. When we were first investigating them, they were 20 affiliates. When it has been taken down, there were 200 affiliates. So, and throughout this entire term, we kind of like mapped out each affiliate, everything. On the case of Lockbit example. In Conti, I can wholeheartedly say it was such an interesting operation. The Conti, their initial vector was everybody, for example, I know I'm just jumping from topic to topic, but let's say in the Conti example, why it matters? It matters because Conti was a semi-targeted attack operation. What they were doing was they were explicitly targeting everybody with a first stage mal-spam campaign, with an email campaign, and then from those already infected targets, they were installing another malware. However, it reached such a level that in Conti operation, at least hundreds of millions of people were infected with their initial mal-spam malware. And then the people who have not been hit by ransomware or extorted were not done so because they thought these are not as lucrative and skipped. For example, that was imported on the Conti piece. However, law enforcement decided to change their focus and started focusing on not the people who are extorting the data, but the people who are infecting multiple people and selling them to ransomware groups. Because in the underground, everything and everyone is for sale. So there are people who are, for example, perform intrusion. They have access and sell it to other people. And in the operation endgame, the focus was targeting the initial access brokers. So I cannot talk about operation endgame so much. I can only say that we were involved with it, but even though Lockbit was more popular, I say that for global cybersecurity, Operation Endgame's impact towards a better future is even higher, because this time it's not the ransomware groups but the initial access brokers, the ones who are performing the first stage of attacks, that are under the radar, and most of them are successfully dissolved thanks to the efforts of Operation Endgame.
I don't know if you can answer this question, but were there any surprises that you found that were not expected, that allowed you to make great gains that helped these operations come down?
All the time. By the way, it happens a lot. Because when you are monitoring these kind of actors, you are not collecting intelligence from the same region of their operation. Sometimes your ability to have communications intelligence from their chat rooms can be very important for you to understand. Sometimes you may not have the power to observe their infrastructure. However, you may be able to see what's going on in terms of their initial access brokers. Sometimes, because even though you see one brand, for example, you see Conti, you see Killing, you see Ransom House, you see INC ransomware, anyone, Hunters International, I mean, just name anyone. Even though you see one brand, at the back end, there are multiple groups operating together. There is one group who are in charge of finding potential victims, another group who have amazing pen test capabilities, and another group who can, let's say, escalate privileges, another group who can create the malware for encryption, and these are groups operating together, and sometimes they don't get along very well. Just in any kind of operation, there may have some disputes in between each other. Sometimes they don't have the required HR personnel. They need to hire somebody from outside that have terrible OPSEC that can lead to some operational errors on their side. That happened many times. Sometimes, because these are people out of, mostly, by the way, I don't like generalization, by Russia, Ukraine, Belarus, etc., and they are making millions, to say the least. And even though they are running these extremely complicated operations, they just like to show off very much. Usually, in terms of right before their apprehension by the law enforcement, what we generally see is they usually get caught when they are bragging, when they are utilizing their cars, when they are going to vacation with their girlfriends. That is usually the area that they make the biggest mistakes.
That's true. In 2024, how would you describe the most dangerous threat actors? Are they evolving? Are they changing? Is the structure different? You just mentioned right now that it's almost like a corporation where some people don't get along. Some of it sounds like it's organized crime. When you mentioned that, there's always this, one person who may be at the center of it all. What do these people look like? What does the organization look like? Or is it spread all over the place?
This year is, so let me put it this way. Lockbit, or this is what we call Ransomware-as-a-Service, which defines, for example, which enables a franchise model, basically. So let's say you are 5 talented individuals, you don't know nothing about ransomware, Lockbit provided you a ready-to-use system, or other brands, by the way, Black Cat, etc., provided you a ready-to-use system. You can go out your way into the world and start attacking, etc. What was the danger in that? It's like, you know, everybody could, to a certain extent, perform an attack. The danger was the mainstream, these kind of attacks becoming mainstream. This was the danger until this year. Too many attacks, none of them too much sophisticated. Yeah, among 200 affiliates of Lockbit, yes, 10 were extremely sophisticated, but 109 was not so much. Particularly for banking institutions such as yourself, who pay millions to EDR, etc., multiple tools, they were not particularly dangerous. And that was the issue up until this year. What we started picking up is, especially after Lockbit being taken down, the issue with the suspicious exit of Black Cat from the market, they start leaving the ransomware-as-a-service business model, and they start establishing these extremely organized teams who work in an almost military-like fashion, and they don't accept anybody from outside, and they micromanage everything in their operation. For example, they have lawyers that advise them how to communicate with the victim. They have the best pen testers that they're hiring by paying at least 10 times what any pen tester can get in legitimate ways. They only accept by means of testimonials from other groups, and they always use exclusively their technologies for communication and job management only. And the worst part is, most of these groups are emerged by the beginning of this year, around, I would say, maybe towards September last year. By the beginning of this year, it was exactly when they started appearing a lot. Those are the same individuals that, now let me rewind a bit, and they have this extremely sophisticated structure. However, they are disguising it as individual childish groups, and that's the biggest risk, with some particularly silly names. For example, I mean, something candy, something rabbit, something something. You feel like, oh, this is just another ransomware. They are not. They are just distributing the focus of law enforcement. They are making you feel like they are another ransomware group. However, they are exclusively managed to one central core, and they are disguising themselves as very generic attacks. And the biggest part is, the most riskiest part is, they are utilizing zero-day attacks, zero-day vulnerabilities, and they have ties with the Chinese zero-day market. I don't know if you would agree with me, but the biggest zero-day market in the world for a very long time was China. I'm not trying to do fear-mongering, by the way. I mean, most experts would agree with me. And what we are starting to see, that these individuals out of Russian Federation have started to have ties with the Chinese zero-day market. We already verified that they purchased multiple zero-days that they have already used in their attacks. And it seems like they're cooperating on a more strategic level. even some of their ransomware panels have started to have a Chinese graphical user interface. So I think that is the worst kind of actors who are behind most of the stuff that you have heard in 2024. And they are really more dangerous than Lockbit, more sophisticated than Conti, and basically most of them are in a country that they are almost never I don't want to say sanctioned, but penalized or brought to court or verdict, as long as they keep their focus on certain countries.
That is something to be very concerned about. And what about third-party attacks? And a lot of the people here have been from different countries, and here in the United States are being told by their regulators that we have to pay attention to the security of the third parties that we use. That's an MO that seems to be very popular, and I think it's growing. What can you tell us about that?
100%, definitely. It's the supply chain attacks or the third-party attacks, or because that's already a privilege which is already given by the system inside the corporate network. Just a couple of weeks ago, we have detected threat actors exploiting some remote code execution vulnerabilities in security products. Imagine the privileges that you are giving to your security products so that they can access everywhere to take samples or monitor network logs. Imagine what happens if they weaponize those security products. Basically, every single large attack that we have seen in the last 2 years, almost exclusively, all of them are resulting from a particular third-party vendor used as a gateway. I mean, I don't know if we're going to be broadcasting this session, so I'm trying to keep away from giving names, but some attacks on different national healthcare regulators in certain countries, some police dispatch forces, multiple banks, they all been victimized thanks to either a company that they are working with or a technology that they're working with. Last year, for example, I don't have the exact number, but more than half of the ransomware attacks that we have seen resulted from Citrix breach. But there is one caveat I think we need to be very, very cautious of, which is when you knew about Citrix breach, we had known about it for more than 8 months. We already known which tailored access broker of which ransomware group. We didn't know, it wasn't called Citrix breach back then. We just seeing a particular initial access broker utilizing an exploit, which was almost always exploiting the Citrix endpoints of companies. Before that, it was FortiGate. Before that, it was something else. And it's not, or it was Draytech Vigor, for example, devices in UK resulted in this. It will be most probably a technology that you are using and you are not, and you are relying on. However, everybody will preach you, say that, oh, you need to be very cautious about updates and CVEs. It was like that for a very long time. Right now, it's almost always either N days or 0 days. So it's not even enough. Yes, it's mandatory to keep track of your updates, but it's not enough. You need to also, right now, get notified about, are there any end-day exploits? Are they one-day? Are they zero-day exploits about any products that you're using? If so, how do you stop a zero-day? Yes, you need to have some additional precautions about this, some walk-arounds until the vendor issues a patch. Do you think most vendors issue a patch in a day, in a week? No, not so much. Some of them, it takes, for some of them, multiple weeks and sometimes months to create a patch as people are getting exploited one after another. And that brings me back to what we are trying to achieve by means of cyber intel, basically. I'm not trying to do fear mongering. Really, I'm not trying that. However, that is usually the case. That has been the case on most of these attacks.
So Kodiak, what lies in the future of ransomware? Are we going to see this get much, much worse before it gets better? Are we going to see this get better at all? I mean, it seems like you've had a few victories in the past couple of years, but it seems like from what you're talking about now, through the reorganizations of the threat actors, we might actually get into a very, very difficult time. And you have in front of you some of the brightest and the best. What advice can you give them, and what do you see as the future of ransomware?
So the thing that kind of like led us to where we are today is not poor security. It is normalizing payment to ransomware groups. They know your agreements with insurance provider about making payments to ransomware groups better than most people. So unless we stop normalizing paying to ransomware groups, it's the snowball effect, unfortunately, will continue, because naturally they are working 24/7. They are not a bunch of guys with hoodies anymore, by the way. That's Hollywood stuff. It's not. We are facing billions of dollars of, groups with hundreds of millions of dollars of resources at their hands, with no risk of being arrested. And I don't want to sound arrogant or stuff, but realistically, the best banking organizations, how many staff do you have? 20, 30, 40, working around the clock, sometimes less in the evening, etc., with certain budgets. But the other party, hundreds of people, thousands of people, how to manage that? It's very difficult. And currently, the way that where we stand today is, when we are normalizing this, the attacks will continue for sure. So unless we make it very difficult for victims, unfortunately, sorry, it's not my place to say, but it's my professional opinion, we make it very difficult to pay, I cannot see the end of it. However, you should be very careful about one thing, please do. This wasn't the case, so I'm extra careful about not attributing these attacks to particular organizations, to particular countries, Russia, Iran, etc. However, this year's groups, particularly in 2024, we have conclusive evidence that ties them to already sanctioned groups and parties. And I really doubt that any party that may be assisting you in these kind of investigations will have that knowledge. So please be extra careful about figuring out if the party that you are making the payment to is connected to an already sanctioned group or country. Because you may face a lot of regulatory stuff. At least you try to push that responsibility to party who is assisting your investigation or incident response, or whoever is by your side at that unfortunate day. Because currently I already professionally, without getting involved in any kind of investigation, I'm seeing people already making payments. I can tell the way that everything figures out. Not that anybody tells me so, but professionally I can pick up some markers. That's how I say that. However, in the near future, when those groups are already confirmed to have ties with sanctioned parties, I really doubt if benefit of doubt would save you from regulatory stuff. So I think that's where we are headed to. And back to your question, when we have more sanctions and we make it more difficult to pay, naturally the ransomware industry will start decreasing. In that case, I think we're gonna face either one or two things. One would be the black data brokering markets that are selling information about you, not holding you ransom or trying to extort from you, but try to get, according to their evaluation, the most valuable information from you and try to sell it to other parties as particular brokers. So I really think that the near future would be, again, people exfiltrating data from you, but have a particular black market that sells that operationally, competitively important data to others. I think following ransomware, that's where the black market trends will be headed towards.
Thank you very much. I'd like to open this up to questions. I know there's somebody with the microphone. I don't know where you are, and I'm a little bit blinded by the lights, but if anybody in the audience has any questions, we'd like to hear them. And where's the person with the microphone? If you just raise your hand, anybody with a question, we'd like to hear that. And while we're looking for somebody with questions, I've always wanted to ask you this, and every time we're together, I forget. I talk to people on a personal level, and I talk to them about cybersecurity, about threats, about your own personal information, and something that I get from people is, well, I don't care if they have my information, everything I do is legal, and it doesn't make a difference anyhow. And I tried to convince them it does make a difference, but they sort of don't believe me. And so I always wonder, what do you say when people tell you that?
Yes, that's also something, feedback that I get very often.
I mean, it pisses me off when they say it to me, frankly. But
for me as well. However, the thing that may not seem very worthy at this particular point, that information may worth a lot in the future. On a personal level, you can never know how this information can be used against you, by the way. It can be used, especially with the rise of AI, by the way. So, a set of customer data, right now, the voice-assisted phishing that you can automatize everything by means of call centers, AI-powered attacks that do themselves, calling people, asking, etc. That's the damage that you take. And for example, in one of those individuals may be a very important person, and then it may land on a reputation damage. You really cannot. I mean, back in the day, it was only, oh, it's just only data. Right now, that data coupled with AI is something else. It's an entirely new attack surface. That's why it matters a lot for me. And we can automate multiple attack vectors against especially retail banking clients. We can do a lot of things thanks to AI as from an offensive perspective, unfortunately.
Do we have any questions here from the audience?
Yeah.
You answered one of my questions about AI, so thank you. I think a lot of what I've been reading is threat actors are targeting help desks at large financial institutions and other companies. You mentioned impersonations using AI to reset passwords or fraudulently or things like that. So can you just talk about against that, or maybe what protocols you think are the most successful to deal with that?
I mean, in the case of help desks or people or similar software that are utilized in banks as call center operations or help desks or similar operations, I mean, there are two things. I mean, if we're talking about the security of that help desk personnel, or if that as an entry point inside the organization by means of that help desk, then obviously it's sandboxing, it's better training in terms of social engineering and training of the call center personnel, and having some very strict isolation rules in terms of their system. So it comes down to training. Mostly, in terms of social engineering, the type of training that we give out most frequently is, again, to the help desk personnel as a potential entry point, because most of the sandboxes, most of any kind of solutions that you have there are may not be very effective for fully undetectable malware and other kinds of stuff. So it comes to training of that particular personnel. If you say that, how can we protect ourselves against fraud attacks that impersonating themselves as help desk personnel? That's very tricky, by the way, because you can never be sure from what happens on the user's side. However, there I may argue, if it's possible, check for multiple countries. We solved this by creating an SDK for your mobile banking application that makes it impossible for a user to open up the internet banking while they are on call, for example. Just doing that by means of a simple SDK just solve this issue as a potential fraud vector on the client device. Or if you are more concerned about this as an additional layer of security, again, I'm talking about not your own help desk, but people who are impersonating your help desk to perform fraud to your client, maybe AI-assisted ones. Secondly, what you can do is that you can basically get help from a fraud intelligence or a cyber intelligence company that can detect which of your clients whose PIIs are most recently compromised, so you can warn them additionally by means of email if you have the resources. So these, I don't know if these are answers to your questions.
Thank you.
Do we have any more? Did that answer your question, sir?
It did. Thank you.
Okay, do we have another question?
Yes. It is my understanding that some of the monies that or payouts on ransomware goes to terrorists or enemies of your countries. Do you have any information on that, on criminals and all that are also not related just to the financial part, but also something that will affect the infrastructures or terrorism basically?
You mean the connection between ransomware and if it's fund? I mean, if we have any kind of definitive connection of those funds being transferred to terrorism, is that the question?
Yes, that's the question.
Sure. I mean, yes. If you ask me, by the way, if you have any conclusive proof, for example, a payment going all the way to, let's say, Al-Qaeda or someone else, or I really don't, because it's not my place to tell. However, as a rule of thumb, what we can say is these individuals extort hundreds of millions of dollars of Bitcoin. Those Bitcoins needs to be laundered to turn into actual physical money. And the places, the intermediaries who are doing this laundering are known to be operated under the protection of multiple organized crime groups, which then have connections with these kind of terrorist organizations. If you define North Korea to be a terrorist state, then I have conclusive and definitive proof, and I have responded to multiple attacks on that front. But if you're saying more unorganized terrorist groups, then I can only speculate. However, if you, I mean, not personally you, of course, but if you can provide me a list of which terrorist organizations are heavily involved with unregistered online gambling, then you can automatically connect that to ransomware. Because unregistered online gambling and very recently online streaming have become one of the best ways of laundering this extorted Bitcoin sums. But of course, most of what I say would still be speculations, but I think, I mean, if responsible agencies, and of course they are doing that, when they do, I'm sure these are the ways that these sums are connected or run to power those. And this money needs to go somewhere, and in underground platforms, there is a saying, say that you cannot eat that alone. So when there is a sum that you are kind of like greenlit or allowed to steal from others, there is a share that will be taken by multiple groups that have ties to those organizations. I don't know if I answered your question.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions? We have
Yes,
time for
we
one
do.
more question.
Thank you. I wanted to know if you've seen initial access brokers resort to insiders within the potential
Yes.
victim.
Amazing question. Thank you. I don't know how we can, I cannot see directly your face, but I really thank you, by the way. Amazing point. Yes and yes. On especially in the group called Scattered Spider, and before that, Fin7, particularly Fin7, and before that, Lazarus, these groups and their initial access brokers were residing into insiders very much. And in some investigations, we have seen people inside the organization people who are also involved in responding to the case were communicating with the threat actor from inside the organization, saying that don't ask 500, just settle for 300. We already know that the board approved 300, etc. And they were saying, don't forget my cut for 100, etc., etc. So we really seen that. I know our time is critical, but there are two things. There are intentional insiders. There are unintentional insiders. I know that's a strange definition, but it happens. In some cases, by the way, there may be some people from inside the organization who think that they are tested for a job application, that they are given a challenge, a small technical challenge for a better job with a better payroll, that they are running to solve a challenge. They are trying to solve a lab, while in fact what they were running inside the organization was an initial malware. So these are unintentional insiders. In terms of intentional insiders, I see that it's not very, very, very common, but I don't have an exact number, but 5 to 10% of cases, or 3 to 5%, almost always have an initial access broker. Especially watch the listings on underground forums saying that I have even seen people working as system administrators selling the data of their own companies as if they are initial access brokers themselves to third-party individuals. I have seen it 2 times, one in Europe, one also in Europe, but in a Balkan country. So that happens quite a lot as well.
Well, I thank you very much. I want to thank FIBA and CELAES. And David, I want to thank you. Of course, as chair, you can ask a question if you want to ask a question. And to Guillermo, who brought us together to this thing. I also want to thank the people who translate. Their job is very, very hard. And thank you very much. And to all the people who have served us here in the hotel, they've done a fabulous job, and that's a hard job too. Thanks for allowing me to be here. And I look forward to the rest of the conference. You guys, especially you who sat here and listened to us, thank you for being here today.
Great.
Likewise. Thank you, everyone. Thanks a lot for your time.